Ken Hinds joins us. He's a knife crime and stop and search campaigner. And Ken, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me on the platform.
Ken, now, you are of the view that the decision made by a jury yesterday in a court of law in the case of the case against a Metropolitan Police firearms officer, that he had not murdered Chris Kaba, a black man involved in a hard stop by police, surrounded by police, shot in the head by one of the officers, Martin Blake. You're of the view that that was the wrong decision by the jury. Why?
No, let me firstly say, I thought the case that was brought on that police officers were wrong. So the simple fact is, I just don't believe that it was murder. I believe it was manslaughter. I believe he was having a bad day in the office. And just felt pissed that Chris wasn't following his orders. I also believe that it was the case again was to disappoint the black community, because it didn't take into account that we want to see justice. We don't want to see, it's not vengeance, but we're looking for justice.
So justice to you would have been that a police firearms officer who was dispatched to follow a car which had been linked to two shootings in the previous few days. Following that, and when they tried to stop the car, and the guy didn't stop the car, didn't get out of the car, didn't submit to arrest. They just, frankly, he was just a bit annoyed. He'd had a bad day. Maybe he'd had a row with the wife in the morning, and so he just showed up dead. But you're thinking that's manslaughter, and he should have been done for manslaughter, not murder. I mean this really, really with great respect, Ken. Are you kidding me?
I'm just giving you my honest opinion. I've been on a number of demonstrations. We've been here before, but we saw the similar situation with the Mark Duggan situation.
Mark Duggan was also a wrong 'un, and the police were also right to shoot him dead.
Julian, I was once a wrong 'un, but does it mean that I should be exterminated?
Because neither of these men were exterminated. They weren't walking on the street and someone said, "He's a wrong 'un, I'll shoot him." They were killed when they were in.
Regardless of what their history may or may not have been, because don't forget, we've seen what the press is doing. They made that Mark Duggan to be the biggest gangster in Europe.
Mark Duggan was a gangster. He was on the... Mark Duggan, I'm sorry, Mark Duggan, his death basically prompted, we ended up leading to the 2011 riots across London, across a lot of the country. People died, people lost their livelihoods and their homes. Absolutely horrific in those circumstances. Many people ended up in prison. But hold on a minute, Mark Duggan was on his way. He was stopped in a car. He was on his way. There was a weapon that was thrown from the car. He had a weapon before. He was on his way. Numerous other men involved in this were all then later convicted of the crime. They were on their way to kill someone. No,
it wasn't. It wasn't. Yes, he did pick up a gun. Oh. He did pick up a dodgy gun to take back to Broadwater Farm. That was
the way you do. The way you do when you're just a nice guy. But look, that's Mark Duggan. Mark Duggan was shot in the...
about protection. So let's not get it twisted.
Oh, give me a break. Give me a break.
The person that the police arrested was the snitch, was the informer. But they allowed him to get off with 4 or 5 guns that they should have taken off the street. Now, it doesn't work. Let's say, if we're going to talk truth,
okay, let's not get caught up in ancient history. Ken, let's go back to Chris. Let's go back to Chris Kaba. Chris Kaba. Now, we were not allowed. Chris,
he was no gangster. He was no gangster. He was a person who was terrified.
Ken, let's go back to Chris Kaba, because the information the police have put out, some of this is just official records. Now, because of the case, it was not to a certain extent relevant, certainly about what the police did, in terms of they didn't know who was driving the vehicle, what we knew about Chris Kaba. Chris Kaba was basically a core member, the police believe, of one of London's most notorious dangerous gangs, the Brixton Hill-based 67 gang in South London. He'd been accused of being involved in 2 shootings in less than a week before he was killed by a police marksman. Let's look at his criminal record. Convictions dating back to the age of 13 for offences including stabbing, lovely lad, intent to cause grievous bodily harm with the stabbing, knife-enabled gang assault, the victim was stabbed and had his arm broken, 2 other knife offences. At the age of 17, he was convicted of affray, possession of an offensive weapon. When he was jailed for 4 years after being convicted of possessing an imitation firearm in 2017. In August 2020, 2 years before he was shot dead, he's handed a 5-month prison sentence for failing to stop in possession of a knife discarded from the vehicle. If he hadn't been killed, he would have stood trial along with 6 other men for the attempted murder of a man who, again, the shooting just prior to when he was shot himself. Police were following a car that was linked to 2 shootings, one of which was outside a primary school, Ken. And they were following it. And when the vehicle did not stop and then repeatedly rammed the police vehicles, police officers out of their vehicles. 16 times, I believe, he was shouted to get out of his car. He refused, and he was shot. Now, I'm sorry, in what way does that man, with that record, with that behaviour, represent the black community? Because if I was a black person, I wouldn't want him to represent me.
Julia, let me tell you this, Mark. Again, that sounds very similar to the Mark Duggan situation,
Doesn't
where
it?
I told you he, all of a sudden, overnight, he became the biggest gangster in Europe. Now,
I just read out facts. Those aren't opinions, those are facts.
Let me say this much to say, what I can say to you, it sounds very much, again, like what they do, it's got a history, the police got a history of doing this, it's called character assassination.
It didn't come up in the court case. It wasn't used in the court case.
But
the jury didn't hear any of this.
I'm just telling you, that's what I'm seeing now.
But the jury didn't hear any of this. But now we've got a right to know that it wasn't this lovely smiling guy who was about to become a dad.
What? So why are you hearing it when it's not, when it wasn't thought to be essential enough to bring in to the case? So why are we hearing it in the public? That's not neither here or there, right? Because you could probably hear about my check could pass if anything did happen to me and pick him and link it saying, oh, Ken, oh yeah, Ken, that's it. Well, what he's a wrong one.
Because the family and the campaigns.
Julia,
Ken.
If I can change,
yes,
there ain't nobody out there.
And I'm really
change.
glad that you weren't shot by a police marksman at the point at which, if and when you were ever involved in anything similar. And it's great that people can change. And I know you do fantastic work working with young people to get them to change their lives, and that's wonderful. We're not going to be able to change everybody. But this is the point, Ken. At that point, the jury of our peers believed that the police officer felt that he was at risk and other police officers were at risk, and he took the action that we pay him with our taxes and employ him to do, which is to take these split-second decisions in these moments. That's not murder. It's not manslaughter. That's a man doing his job.
Please, Julia. Look, we've got to look at the prosecution was weak. Was weak.
Because it wasn't a good case.
No, because the defence was very strong. It is bankrolled by the Police Federation. They are the real dangers to stopping us from making real change, because they will keep defending wrong-uns like this officer.
He's not a wrong-un.
He is.
What evidence do you have to say that?
You can keep. Common sense will tell me they didn't know who was in the car, but yet they thought this is it. Whoever was in that car must be involved in something. Now, it's quite clearly they had it under control. They had boxed him in. He wasn't going nowhere. You're telling me you've got to take a shot in his head for that?
He was trying to ram them out of the way with a large vehicle.
Yeah, right. Well, they do a box thing. And from what I've seen there, he wouldn't have got very far.
They had every reason to believe, given that car, they didn't know who was in the car, but that car had been used in 2 shootings as a getaway vehicle in the last few days, that it was likely that whoever was in the car had a gun on them. That was a reasonable suspicion at that time.
But, yes, but I've been on Operation the Police, Armed Response Unit, and see them do a hard stop. And I see them do it professionally. But this was a bodge way that they've done it. First of all, they were all plainclothes unmarked cars, except in the one when he came to be stopped. Then that one, but all the ones was following him weren't following him.
Yeah, that's how the police do follow people undercover. They don't have police cars going, hey, we're the police, we're following you.
No, and then they light up. They've got the blue light going.
Yeah.
This didn't happen. Okay, in this case when it started off.
But so there was a police car that stopped him, so we knew it was the police. Ken, how is it? Why on earth would law-abiding members of, again, I don't like this phrase, the black community. There isn't a black community, there isn't a white community, individual people, but individual black people. Why would law-abiding black people living in that area, why would they want this to be a case which is about a white officer killing a black man, so it must be race, when actually this is about officers, people employed by the state to, and I'm not pretending that every officer is completely clean. We've seen enough in recent years to know there are problems. And we know there are racist officers. I'm not pretending that isn't the case either. But this is someone who's employed to do this job, along with other men and women, who has done his job tackling a violent criminal. We know that. That's not a matter of opinion. That's in his court record, OK? That's been decided repeatedly, unless we've just got a whole load of juries that are completely and utterly corrupt. This man doesn't represent them. This man is the enemy of the so-called black community. This man is exactly the opposite of what the so-called black community need to have. When we talk about getting justice, what we want is justice for ordinary people, black, white, Asian, whatever, who want to be able to walk around their streets safely, knowing that someone's not going to drive by and open fire on them.
Right, and that's right also. And if he was involved in that lifestyle, then he deserves to be brought
we know he was.
And hold on, and held accountable for his action. No, we don't. And just because, as I said to you, if you are going, it's like a theatre. That's all they created. This was not about justice. This was just about making look like that you followed the procedure.
No, he made himself look like he was a criminal because he was a criminal. I don't know about you. I don't regularly get into a car and drive the car that was involved in 2 shootings in the last few days. It never happened to me.
Julia, if it happened to a white young lad or Asian young lad,
I would be applauding the police officer the same.
I'll have the same attitude as I've got today. So it's not about black. And we're not. It doesn't represent the black community, nor do my views represent cross.
Okay,
it represents my own personal
Final point. We know that the police in America have got an issue. There's a trigger-happy issue with some of the police in America, getting their guns out all the time. That's not what is the case. You have to be very highly trained to be an armed police officer in this country. We also know that they deal with 4,000 incidents where armed police are called to every single year. And yet we look at 1 or 2 shootings max, when weapons are even drawn a year. We're looking at 0.01 or 2%. I mean, well under, less than 10% of 1% of cases where they draw their weapons. Is it not right to conclude that police are not trigger happy? They're not just having a bad day, so they feel like going out and shooting a wrong 'un, black or white, that actually when they do draw their weapons and when they do fire, it's because they absolutely feel they need to. Is that not a fair conclusion to draw?
I think a fair conclusion to draw is that anyone can have emotional triggers. Anyone can have mental problems, and it doesn't happen overnight. It happens over time.
It just randomly happened when there was this man in the car.
Not randomly. This could be the straw that broke the camel's back. But the simple fact is, this officer would not just have got here just today. It would have had symptoms going through, and this is what I'm concerned about. Because yes, even though we've got an exceptional history of not being gun-toting, but when we don't want to get it there either. So much about just providing safeguard is about common sense to prevail, and let's see justice for all to prevail.
We did. That's what we saw. Yes, we saw justice, and that police officer is going to now be freed. He may well face some sort of misconduct charges and work.
And he should be thrown out the force. No 2 ways about it.
I would shake his hand for doing a job keeping us safe. Ken Hinds, I don't think it's possible to disagree with you more. I really appreciate you coming on and speaking to us, though, Knife Crime and Stop and Search campaign.